Walter Block. He needs no introduction, and he joins the show once again. I think he has become the most frequent guest on the program. This might be his sixth or seventh appearance so far, and we've been going through his scholarly body of work uh, every time he appears on this show. And today we're discussing probably his most audacious book yet, Space Capitalism, co-written with Peter Lothian Nelson. The subtitle is How Humans Will Colonize Planets, Moons, and Asteroids. Hey, welcome to the show, Walter. How are you?
Always a pleasant day with you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure welcoming you to the show as well. So, I'd like to start off with this. To what extent is the book, co-written with Peter Nelson, a proposal for colonizing planets, moons, and asteroids, or a blueprint for doing so? In that, you suggesting that we colonize planets, or or do you believe that inevitably we will do so, and this is just how we can do it?
I think a little of both. I favor it. I think I can speak for my co-author. We both favor colonies on the moon, on Mars, and on the other planets, on next uh, areas after the present one. And we also have a blueprint for it, namely capitalism or free enterprise or private property rights or something like that applied to areas where hither it hasn't been heretofore it hasn't been applied to other solar systems eventually, but at least this solar system and certainly the moon and Mars would be the most reasonable starts.
Mhm. Okay. And were you always been interested in space exploration and conquest?
Well, like when I was a little kid, did I have a hobby of this? Not really. um, when I was more of an adult and got into libertarianism, and I guess the core of libertarianism is private property rights, then my entree into this was not so much space, but more private property rights. And as you know, I have four books on private property rights. One, why we should have private property rights anywhere. The second one was privatizing roads, streets, bridges, tunnels. The third one was privatizing bodies of water like oceans, rivers, lakes. And now here's the fourth one, privatize the moon, Mars, Neptune, Saturn, whatever. So my entree into this is not so much through space. And there are some people that are, space, space, space. That's their childhood hobby. I wasn't like that. Mine was more private property rights, private property rights, private property rights, and then apply it to anything that moves or anything that doesn't move, just sort of apply it to everything, because I think private property rights are the key to civilization and the key to prosperity and the key to justice. So my mission, like Captain Kirk would say, my mission is to promote private property rights and libertarianism.
Mhm. Okay. So, do you suggest that we own or privatize the means in which we explore space, or are you suggesting that we take ownership or privatize either sections of planets or even entire planets?
Well, when I'm asked, do I want vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? My answer is both. And here I would say both. We should privatize the means of getting there, the spaceships, whatever, and also privatize bits of the moon or bits of Mars or bits of wherever we get to. There are asteroids where it's like solid metal or solid gold or whatever, I'm not sure. Whatever it is, privatize. So my answer would be both. We should privatize the means of getting there, and once we get there, we should privatize the territory.
Okay. Um, so this may be an awkward question, but the first nation state to send anything on outside of Earth really is the Soviet Union. So uh, an entity that does not quite respect private property all too much. So what does it say about space exploration and the rights of private property in general?
Well, on the one hand, I want to say it's a good start. There's that joke, what do you call 50,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. I'm kidding about that, of course, but it's a joke. I would say that the Soviets were human beings, and I'm not a big fan of the Soviet economy. Russian economy is a lot more free enterprise than the Soviet economy. But if you put an inordinate amount of wealth and you got bright physicists and mathematicians and chemists and engineers, and you stuff a lot of money in that area, well, then you can you get off the planet. And you're quite right; they were the first ones off the planet, out into, well, they didn't get quite to the moon first. The U.S. got to the moon first, but I would say it's a good start, and they're human beings, they're fellow human beings, and I salute them for taking the first baby step onto other solar systems.
So you consider it more of a human victory than a Soviet victory.
Well, both, but not so much a Soviet victory. It's more they screwed up the economy very, very badly. But even if you screw up an economy very badly, but then you push a lot of the wealth toward something. I mean, if they would have focused on violins or motorcycles or and at the cost of virtually everything else like food, well, then I would imagine they'd get some really good violins or some really good motorcycles because they're bright people. They just had a bad economy. So I don't see it so much as a Soviet victory, although it was that. Again, they were the first ones off the planet, so we have to take our hats off to them. So I don't see it so much as a Soviet victory and more as a human victory.
Certainly. Yeah. And they also very much invested their capital, so to speak, on chess. And yeah, some of the greatest chess players were Soviets. So I
That's
guess
a great, great example. I wish I had thought of that, but I thank you for it. If you put a lot of your effort in the chess uh, at the cost of God knows what, so I would say they succeeded in spite of the Soviet economy, not because of the Soviet economy. But the chess example is a marvelous example.
certainly. Yeah. I'm sure Garry Kasparov, the last Soviet chess champion, would agree with you on that. I'm sure, yeah, not to bring up your age, but I'm sure you are old enough to remember the space race that was launched because of the Soviet Union. So, how would you compare that space program to, I guess, what we would call the private space race of today between Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm 84 years old. I don't mind telling my age. I earned every year, and I'm still here. And what the space race consisted of was, I won't say ruining the economy, but I'll say biasing the economy. Namely, they started all sorts of effort and money taken away from other things like motorcycles and violins and food and pushed it toward engineering, physics, chemistry, and math. That was the big push. Now, there's nothing wrong with those fields. Those are good fields, but in a free market economy, we would have a balance. So much for food, so much for uh, that kind of education, so much for cars, so much for health. And what the government did is it pushed us in that direction. Namely, it altered the free decisions of the consumers. And I think that that was a mistake because I think that uh, the satisfying the customers, the desires of the consumers and the producers, namely the free enterprise system, would be best. And what they did is they skewed it toward physics, chemistry, math, engineering, stuff like that, that would help us get to the moon or help us win the race. And I think that the impetus for the race should not come from the government. The government, for anarcho-capitalists such as I am, is not a legitimate institution in the first place because they take money from people against their will. They call it taxes. And we have a word for people who take money from other people against the will of the others, and that's called theft. So I'm not a big fan of that, but I acknowledge that this did help get people on the moon, U.S. Citizens on the moon first.
Certainly. So, you would object to, say, NASA on principle of the anarcho-capitalist political philosophy?
Yeah, based on anarcho-capitalism, government is, and by the way, anarcho-capitalist is just a small part of all libertarians. Many libertarians believe in a little bit of government, but I don't think that there's any libertarian who believes in skewing resources from what the people would want and in the direction of the space race. So I would say that they pushed the economy off its proper sphere toward the space race, and that's part of the reason why we succeeded. Again, if you have a good economy and you take a lot of resources that don't belong there, you can accomplish miracles, given the Russian chess or any hypothetical.
Okay. Yeah, I've been reading some Herbert Spencer lately. He was really well known in his time, but he's largely forgotten now. So if he lives in contemporary times, would you categorize him as part of your tribe of libertarians?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, he's been excoriated by a lot of people for a lot of things, but I would count him as part of the gang being libertarianism. And the way I see libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism at the top, and the most famous person there is Murray Rothbard. Then one step lower, minarchism or limited government libertarianism, where armies, courts, and police. And the most famous people there would be Ayn Rand and Robert Nozick. Then one step below that would be constitutionalism. The US Constitution, as Ron Paul, the leader of that, would interpret it, not as the president or any other Supreme Court would interpret it. And last and least would be classical liberalism. And the most famous people there are Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek. We have armies, courts, and police, and roads, and post offices, and bunches of other things. Very, very limited welfare. That would be the entire group as I see it, and Spencer would certainly fit in there somewhere.
Okay. Um, so another government program that I'd like to chime in upon is the United States Space Force, founded in 2019 by the current president, Donald J. Trump. People ridiculed it when he proposed it, but it seems to be running well in my view.
Well, this would be yet another example of government interference. Look, there's government interference and then there's government interference. If they have to interfere, promoting the space race, I think, is better than the welfare system, which impoverishes people paradoxically. So I'm against it, but I'm not as against it as I am against other government programs, which are even worse. So this again is a step toward the moon. And on the other hand, he start this thing. We have an army, a navy, an air force, and now we're going to have a space
Yeah, it's the
force.
fourth branch of the army, I suppose. Yeah.
Right. Well, it seems a little premature. Hopefully, we won't have any fights on the moon. I think it's a little premature to have a space army or a space navy or a space air force or whatever, space cadet force, whatever you want to call it. I mean, if you have to, you have to. There are bad guys out there, and you need some sort of defense. I mean, the anarcho-capitalists would say we also need defense, private defense agencies. But from a limited government point of view, you have to have defense because there are bad guys out there. And if those bad guys ever get into space, and probably they'll be the last ones there. Although, China and Russia are among the most advanced people in terms of technology, and they might get up there too. And hopefully, there'll be no war on the moon or no war on Mars and no war on the Earth either, for goodness sakes.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that brings us to my next question, which is to what extent do you foresee the possibility of, again, warfare that is outside of Earth, either within, on the surface of different planets or moons, or even interplanetary warfare? Because, human nature is what it is.
Well, one of the reasons I favor colonization of the moon and Mars is I'm afraid of a nuclear exchange on Earth. And a nuclear exchange on Earth might knock out 99% of all of us. And I'm pro-human. Some of my best friends are human. My wife is human. My children are human. You're human. I'm pro-human. I don't want the human race to end. And I fear that if we have a nuclear exchange on the Earth, the human race might end and we'll have, I don't know, bugs and snakes, and that'll be it. Whereas if we also have people on Mars and people on the moon, hopefully they will learn from the horror that I'm depicting here, and they won't fight each other as much or at all. So it's sort of like an insurance policy. You know, if I were the king of the human race and I wanted the human race to continue forever, as I do, much better to have three places, Earth, Moon, and Mars, rather than just the Earth. Because some people are crazy and they might have a nuclear exchange, God forbid. So that would be one of my motivating forces for urging colonization of the moon and Mars so that we'd have people there, so that human life would go on even if the Earth became the asteroid belt.
Okay. Yeah. Just a somewhat related question. The Pandora box of nuclear weaponry has been opened, and there's no way to put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak. But I wondered, uh, by your principle, do you believe that nuclear warfare can be mitigated or lessened in terms of likelihood by
Well,
privatizing nuclear weapons?
yeah, I would go along with that. I mean, so far, the nuclear weapons have only been used twice, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and hopefully they're never used again. Murray Rothbard wrote about gun control or weapon control. And what he said was nuclear weapons are contrary to libertarianism because they can't focus on guilty people, whereas a gun or I don't know, a rocket ship or whatever could focus on just the guilty people. Whereas something that can't just focus on guilty people is by definition, an invasive weapon or an improper weapon. Now, I and my son co-authored an article saying that nuclear weapons would be allowed on Jupiter. Uh, on Jupiter, I mean, it's a much bigger place, and now everybody has 10,000 square miles. And if you want to have your nuclear weapon in the middle of your area, God bless, and I'll have one in the middle of my area. So it wouldn't be necessarily an invasive weapon on Jupiter. But on Earth, we're too small for nuclear weapons, would be my view.
Okay. So the answer is yes, but not on this planet.
Right. In other words, there's nothing per se wrong with nuclear weapons on Jupiter or on a gigantic planet where we had 10 people living there or 100 people living there, and everyone had 10,000 square miles. Everyone had as much area as, say, the whole United States or all of Canada or all of China. What the heck? Then it wouldn't necessarily be a threat, an improper threat. But on Earth, we shouldn't have nuclear weapons. Well, we shouldn't explode nuclear weapons. Nothing wrong with having them. Well, I'm not sure about that. I think even having them on second thought would be a problem for libertarians.
Mhm. Okay. Um, what is your vision for managing, say, trade between planets, just to avoid, I suppose, war between planets?
Well, I'm for free trade. I'm against tariffs. I'm against quotas. I'm against any interference with trade because on two grounds. One on ethical grounds and the other on empirical grounds or utilitarian grounds. On ethical grounds, I own this shirt, you own that shirt. And right now we could trade shirts if we wanted to. But if somebody said we couldn't, or they put a tariff and said if we do this, you have to pay 10% tariff, then they're interfering with our right to trade. And right now I own this shirt and you own that shirt. And part of ownership is a whole bundle of goods. I can wash it, I can give it away, I can trade it, I can sell it, I can wear it, I could wear it on my head if I wanted. But if you tell me I can't sell it or I can't sell it freely, then to some extent my private property rights in this shirt and yours in your shirt have been abrogated. So this is in a sense theft. So that would be the deontological view for free trade. The empirical or the utilitarian or the pragmatic is every time free trade occurs, there's mutual benefit. I bought this shirt for $10, let's say. How much did I value the shirt? More than 10. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought it. If I valued it at 9, I would have lost $1. If I valued it at 10, I would have gained nothing. And why would I bestir myself to buy a shirt for $10? I must have valued it at more. Let's say I valued it at 15. Well, I made a profit. Now you sold me the shirt. You've got 1,000 of them. You were dying to get rid of these shirts, and you valued it at $1, and you made $9 profit. Did we exploit each other? No, we each benefited each other because we each gained. So free trade is necessarily beneficial ex ante. Now, ex post, who knows? Maybe the shirt's no longer in style and I regretted it. That's possible. But free trade is necessarily good. And Donald Trump, with his tariffs, is off the rails. Look, if tariffs were so great, why doesn't New Orleans have a tariff against Miami? Thank God the Constitution doesn't allow that sort of a thing, but the idea that that could occur is just preposterous. Well, it's equally preposterous between countries, between cities, between states, and between planets. So if they can make things better in the moon than on Mars, and other things they can make better on Mars than on the moon, and they trade, they both gain. So I would hate to see a situation of tariffs between planets.
Okay. I'd like to propose this thought experiment for you. Suppose I am a highly enterprising, say, astronomer, and I discovered a whole slew of, say, asteroids and moons, and I start to make, say, title deeds to all of them, and I sell it to either you or everyone else with the prices range from $5 to 500,000. Uh, would that be considered a free and fair trade, or am I defrauding people?
Well, according to John Locke, who is the father of libertarianism when it comes to private property rights, I think I say that without fear of contradiction from any libertarian. The way you get to own property is by mixing your labor with it. You plant a tree, you plant a crop, you get rid of a boulder, you make it nice, and now you own it. Or you domesticate a wild cow, and now you own the cow. So the question comes, well, how much effort do you have to put in? And how much intensive does your homesteading have to be, and for how long? There are a lot of continuum problems. Now, what Murray Rothbard said, my mentor, my guru, he said, east of the Mississippi in the United States, the land is pretty fertile. And a family of four, if they homesteaded for a year or two, I forget how long, they can get 160 acres. Where did he get 160? Well, it could satisfy a family of four. Why isn't it 150 or 170 acres? It was arbitrary. You can't deduce how many acres from the principles of non-aggression and homesteading, but that's what he picked. And then west of the Mississippi, the land is less fertile. He picked 1,600 acres, a family of four, a year or two. Again, arbitrary, but not totally unreasonable. Namely, the more fertile and the more nice the land is, the less of it you can get. Now, if I can extrapolate from what Murray said, if you're going to homestead stuff in the Sahara Desert, you get more because the Sahara Desert is less hospitable to human beings. And the same with Alaska or Siberia, you get more. How much more? I don't know, maybe instead of 1,600 acres, 16,000 acres. I'm not sure. Well, the moon is even less hospitable than the Sahara Desert or Alaska or other places, Siberia. So if you're going to get 1,600, 16,000, well, maybe you get 160,000 acres. I'm just extrapolating. I don't know that these are good numbers, but certainly you should be able to get more for a family of four with a year's work of doing whatever it takes to homestead on the moon. Now, you don't get the whole moon because the whole moon is way more than 160,000 acres, but you get a little bit of it. I don't know, 1% of it or 2% of it. And if Mars is even less hospitable, then you get a little bit more. So if you homesteaded it, then you could sell it. But my understanding from your question is you didn't homestead it. You just sort of said, I own it. And now you start selling it to people. I don't think that that's kosher. I don't think that's legitimate. I think in order to sell it, you first have to own it. And the way to get to own it is to mix your labor with it, a la John Locke. Now, it's interesting that according, if I can use an analogy on the oceans, according to the law of the sea treaty, if you want to own a part of the ocean, which comes from my Oceans and Rivers and Lakes book, it's the common heritage of all mankind. I think that's the exact way they put it. And now there are treaties on the moon and or on space, and they start saying that anyone who explores the moon or Mars is doing it in behalf of the common heritage of all men, and we should have a commons. Everybody should own it. Now the problem with that is, well, you got to the moon and I didn't, and somehow I get part of the moon. No, I don't get any part of the moon because I didn't mix any labor with it. You were there first. You should own whatever the acreage is or the square mileage of it is, and I shouldn't. And this common heritage means that we all own it together and then in common. And now you have the tragedy of the commons. What's the tragedy of the commons? The tragedy of the commons is when we own stuff in common, we don't take care of it as well as when we own it individually. You own that shirt, I own this shirt, we take care of it. But if there are 1,000 people and 1,000 shirts and the shirts get moved around, look, nobody who rents a car worries about an oil change. The owner of the car worries about the oil change. So that would be one way to put it. Another way to put it is the cow and the buffalo. The cow and the buffalo, as far as I'm concerned, and biologists shut your ears for this, are the same animal. They're big, they're fat, they're smelly. If you run into one, you're in trouble. They sort of look alike, and yet the cow never came within 1 million miles of extinction, and the buffalo almost was extinct. Why? Given that they're the same animal, well, one was able to own privately, and the other was not for a long time. Happily, now you can own a buffalo or an alligator or other things, but and now you have that problem with the elephants in Africa. If they're owned a little bit privately, like in Botswana, they're more safeguarded than in other African countries where the private property rights are non-existent. Whereas in Botswana, they're attenuated, but there's some vestige of them. So it would be the same thing with the oceans or with Mars or Moon. And also, if you're going to go to the moon and try to homestead in your behalf, you have a good incentive to do that because there'll be a payoff for you. Whereas if you have to do it in behalf of 8 billion people, we all own 1/8 billionth of what you're doing, and you only own 1/8 billionth of what you're doing, your incentives to do it are greatly attenuated. So I would say that this idea of the common heritage of all mankind is just socialism, egalitarianism, and it's nonsense, and we should have private property rights.
Okay, well, since you mentioned the moon, just an aside, you would probably like the television series Yellowstone with Kevin Costner. I think it speaks a lot to your libertarian leanings. But I bring this example because one of the main plot lines of the show is that Kevin Costner and his family establish a town and he has a ranch, and the government is coming in, I think, of Montana to either appropriate some of the lands or all of it or tell Kevin Costner what to do. So let's imagine another thought experiment relating to the moon, where you are the Kevin Costner in the story. You've managed to homestead a good chunk of the moon. But since you're still an American citizen, you don't formally renounce your American citizenship upon, say, inhabiting the moon. The US government is telling you that, well, since you're still an American citizen, you're still bound by what the American government says, and the American government says that we would like to appropriate this part of the moon that you happen to own to, say, build an observatory or a research station, or we discover some really good resources that may benefit the world, and they just happen to be lying underneath the part of moonland that you inhabit. So, what's your response?
Well, I just want to mention, in case it never comes up, Heinlein, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's a novel
Yeah,
beloved
yeah,
of all Terrans, and it's a
yeah,
little bit
Heinlein.
like this, where the government, the Earth government, is telling the Mooniacs, people who live on the moon, what to do, and they don't much like it, and they have a rebellion. Anyone who's interested in the moon should read "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress" by Heinlein. Now, what you say is interesting. Uh, First of all, let me change your question. Not this treasure is not located underneath me, but it's located on my surface property. And this is important for a reason I'll get to in a second. I would say that the government is nationalizing part of my property. And we have that now. We have this thing called eminent domain. If I want to build a road, I'm now in New Orleans and I want to build a road to Seattle. How far is it from Seattle to New Orleans? I don't know, 2,000 miles. How many people own property between the two? I don't know, a million maybe. And there's the holdout problem. And now the government steps in and says, well, we're going to nationalize your property, eminent domain, expropriation. It's for the public good, and we'll pay you what we think is a fair market price. But if you don't like it, too bad on you, would be the view. Now, in my book on roads, what I say is that we can get around this by building, let's say you're the holdout. And you're in the middle of Omaha somewhere. I think Omaha is somewhere between New Orleans and Seattle. And what we can do is build a tunnel over your property or a tunnel under your property or a bridge over your property so we can get around that. And I think I make the case that we don't really need eminent domain. We can solve the holdout problem through market processes. But they're too lazy to do that. They want my land, or maybe my land is necessary because it has the best view of Mars or something like that. Well, I would say it's improper. Now, when you mention underneath, there is this doctrine that if you own the surface of a planet, you own down like a cone down to the core of the moon and up into the air. Or let's say on the Earth, I own a square mile in the middle of Louisiana, and now I own way down 4 million, not 4 million, 4,000 miles to the core of the Earth and up into the airplane. Well, this is not proper because I didn't homestead anything 30,000 feet above. The people that homesteaded that were the airplanes. I didn't homestead anything way, way down under me. So slant drilling is legitimate. Namely, I have land, you have land, and what you do is you go down and then under me. That would be okay because I didn't homestead a mile down and you were the first one there. Now, it's true that you can't homestead under me so close that my buildings fall under. Now, in New York City, in Manhattan, it's built on a solid rock. So if you go down and under, you can get pretty close to under my property. But in New Orleans, it's built on a swamp. And if you come under me, you'll cave my property in. So you have to go way, way down. So the criteria would be you can have slant drilling, but you can't violate the rights of your neighbors and their property. So again, I'm trying to break up your question into two, one on the surface, one underneath, and that would be my answer for both cases.
Okay. And what if you have a dispute with another private owner of, say, a portion of space?
Well, hopefully we are each anarcho-capitalists, and we go to a private defense agency or a private court. And the private court makes a determination. You and I are now having a dispute, whether on Earth or on the moon. But we're both decent people, and we're not going to, neither one of us is going to say my way or the highway. Neither one of us is going to use violence against the other, but we're both reasonable people. We just disagree as to the proper ownership of the shirt you're wearing. I claim you took it from me yesterday by mistake because you're a nice guy, but you say no, it's been on in your closet forever. And we go to court. We go to a private court, and then the private court will make a determination. And we sign a contract with the private court that we will abide by their decision. It's sort of like the American Arbitration Association, which takes weeks to make a determination, whereas the government courts take years, many years, not just a year or two. But, you know, Dickens wrote a book about jaundice and jaundice. Two plaintiff and defendant in a court, and it just went on for forever through the generations. That's an exaggeration, but the government courts are very inefficient, and private courts are efficient, and we would settle the dispute in that way.
Okay, right. Or you can settle it the way that Abraham and Lot from the Bible did. They say that, if you go this way, I'll go that way. so neither of us have to face each other again.
Or we can flip a coin. Or there are civilized ways of settling disputes. Flipping a coin is one of them if we both agree to it, or going to a private arbiter or something like that. And hopefully we wouldn't get into a fight over the shirt that you're wearing that you stole from me the other day.
Yeah, hopefully not. Okay. So I asked you earlier about the space race between, say, the United States and the Soviet Union. To what extent should we be prepared for another space race, say, between the United States and the government of China?
Well, we might have one, and I would say bet the let the better government win. I'm kidding about that. I'm against governmental ones, but you did mention Musk and Bezos and who's the other guy you
Branson,
mentioned?
maybe? Yeah, Richard
Yeah,
Branson.
Branson. Why shouldn't we have Branson, Bezos, and Musk do the race against three Chinese guys who are private? And by the way, the Chinese economy is favorite movie of mine was The Mouse That Roared. Um, uh, have you ever seen The Mouse That Roared?
No, tell me about it.
It's a wonderful movie. Peter Sellers played all the roles. It was a little country like Liechtenstein, and it was at the end of World War II, and the U.S. was giving Marshall Plan aid to every country, and Liechtenstein wanted some foreign aid, but the U.S. wasn't giving any to Liechtenstein. So the queen of Lithuania, or the queen of this principality, Peter Sellers, got this great idea. Let's get into a war with the United States. We'll lose, and then they'll give us foreign aid, just like they're giving the Germans and Italians. And so they set up an army, and the army is headed by the general, Peter Sellers, and he's got about 15 people. Oh, no, first they write a letter to the U.S. declaring war, and the U.S. just throws it in the wastepaper basket. And the bureaucrat who throws it in the wastepaper basket, guess who? Peter Sellers. He played a lot of roles. So anyway, you get this army of about 10 guys, and they go over to the U.S., and don't ask, they win. They conquer the U.S. And then the highlight of this movie is the general, Peter Sellers, and the queen, General Sellers. And the queen is yelling, "You idiot, you were supposed to lose the war. You won the war." Just a marvelous movie. Hong Kong was the mouse that roared.
Yeah.
When Britain left Hong Kong, the China promised, two countries, one system, whatever. They didn't do it politically, but economically, the Hong Kong system of free enterprise took over China to some degree, not totally. China is not yet a laissez-faire country, but to a great degree, the success of the Chinese economy, I attribute to the Hong Kong system of free enterprise. So I think that's part of the reason why China is so well developed. I mean, they have trains that go, what, 250 miles an hour? In the US, the trains go 50 miles an hour if we're lucky. So I think the Chinese and the Russian countries, the people there are very bright, and they might be good competitors in the moon race or in the Mars race. And I wish good luck to all of them. Look, Musk, under the NASA, I forget what NASA stands for, Space Administration, something like that. Under NASA, when they shot up a rocket, and the rocket came down, they had to throw away the rocket.
Mhm.
Under Musk, they reused the rocket. Imagine if what city are you now in?
Budapest, Hungary.
Budapest. Imagine if I take a plane to visit you, and then we have to throw away the plane. And then you come and visit me, we have to throw away that plane. Air transport is going to be very expensive. Even if there are 300 people on the plane, you have to throw away the plane. So the best estimate is that the private people do this for about 2 or 3% of what the government does, which is par for the course. In every area where government and private both do the same thing, like in sanitation or mail delivery, the private is way more efficient than the government enterprise, mainly because if you screw up in the government, you stay in business. You screw up in the market, you lose profit, and if you keep screwing up, you go broke and have to do something else. So we have this continuous improvement system in the market, whereas in the government, you don't have that. So I attribute Chinese and Russian expertise and economic success to marketizing a little bit.
Right. Yeah, so you mentioned the fact that we have to throw away spaceships. Then that somehow brought me into the Challenger accident. It's one of the more, I think it should be the most embarrassing public incident in the Reagan administration, other than the one with Iran. Uh, but that brings me to whether the, say, if there's a space program that is, say, Musk, Bezos, and Branson dominated, would minimize, you know, such instance as what happened to Challenger.
I think they would. Look, mistakes are made in the government and mistakes are made in private enterprise. Private enterprise is not perfect because guess who is involved in private enterprise? Human beings. And human beings are the mistake-making animal. We get up in the morning, it's probably a mistake. We have lunch, probably a mistake. We go to bed, mistake. We're continually making mistakes. But as Thomas Sowell, one of my favorite economists, says, a system that penalizes mistakes is a much better system than a system that doesn't penalize mistakes. Well, in the private enterprise, they really penalize mistakes. Look, Katrina killed 1,900 people in New Orleans. And the reason for it was the Army Corps of Engineers, their levees fell. They're still in business. Imagine if a private company owned the Mississippi River and the levees fell and 1,900 people were killed. You'd get new management. Well, you wouldn't get the same Army Corps of Engineers. So look, there might be a Challenger mishap under Branson or Bezos or Musk or the Russian or the Chinese equivalents. It could happen. This is not like picking daisies, going to the moon or Mars. It's a dangerous thing, and we need a lot better engineering and math and physics before we're better at it. So there might be mistakes, but if there are, the private people will pay for it. Either they'll lose profits or they'll have to go broke, and then other people who make fewer mistakes will get in on it. Whereas if the government does it, look, the NASA was in charge of the Challenger. Is NASA still in business? Yes, NASA is still in business. Whereas if Musk did that, Musk wouldn't be in business anymore. So I would say that yes, private enterprise would be a much better vehicle for getting up to the moon or Mars than the government.
Okay. All right. Should we should our process or our mission to colonize, say, a given planet be hampered in any way if we discovered life on that given planet?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, they say that Mars has a better shot of having previous life. The moon has less of a chance of having previous life on it. So I'm not an expert in this, but I think there was once life. Now, if the life is a monster who will eat up all human beings, well, then we probably shouldn't go to Mars. I mean, or if there's some disease that'll kill us all. So I can conceive of situations where we say, look, we can't go to Mars. We can go to the moon, but we can't go to Mars, or vice versa. If there was some sort of danger that would, be a preposterous danger, I can conceive of that. I mean, part of libertarianism is to promote life. And if what is it, Pandora's box you mentioned? Well, if Mars is Pandora's box and it's really off limits for humans because if we go there, we all die. Well, it's a no-brainer to say, nobody should go. And if you go, we're going to shoot you out of the air or out of the distance between Earth and Mars because if you go there, we all die. You're a mass murderer. You should cut out your Mars attempt to colonize. But this is, how shall I say it, a hypothetical, one that's just interest theoretically. Hopefully, there's nothing on Mars that will kill all people on Mars and on Earth or anything like that.
Yeah. Reminded somewhat of that movie Avatar, which is not a movie that I like. Incidentally, the planet that the Earth people believe visit is called Pandora. So,
Ah,
the obvious
I
metaphor there.
I saw that movie, a great movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess we don't share this opinion then. It's not one of my
Oh,
favorite movies.
you didn't like it? Why not?
Um, it it's basically a space version of that other Kevin Costner movie, Dances with Wolves. So
Well, the way I see it, the big green people,
blue, the Navi. Yeah, yeah,
The Navi, the big green people, they were triple the size of people.
yeah, yeah.
They were there first. They were there first. They homesteaded that. They weren't animals. I mean, they looked not human, but when we see the Martians or the Navians, they don't have to look like us. If they're rational and coherent and you can communicate with them, they should have the rights of people. Even if they look like the Navi looked, they didn't look like humans. They were triple our size. They would have been good in the NBA. But they were there first. Now, I don't know that they own the whole planet, but the Earthlings were trying to take over the whole planet, and the Earthlings were in the wrong. So why don't you like the movie?
Well, it's too what do you call it derivative. Like I said, there are movies that have been made about the same subject. It's just I think it's just the about the conquest of the Native Americans, but it being put into the context of space.
Well, in Dances with Wolves, uh, again, the U.S. was in the wrong
Okay.
because the natives were there first. But in reality, a lot of people say, criticize libertarians. They say, look, if you really believe in libertarianism, all white people and Chinese people and black people have to leave because the whole U.S. belongs to the native people, the Indians. They were there first. The argument against that attempt at a reductio ad absurdum is as follows. Right now, if you take a plane from Boston to LA, east of Mississippi, you'll see a few lights at night. There's a city here, a city there. You west of Mississippi, apart from Denver and Las Vegas, there's nobody there. The place is bloody empty, and we have now 360 million people. How many people were, how many Indian native people were there when the Europeans first came? The best estimate is 3 to 4 million. Well, if 360 million can't fill up the place, 3 to 4 million can't fill up the place at all. So yes, the Indians they owned a percent or two of the total thing. On the other hand, when the Europeans came, they started scalping them, and they were pretty nasty. So a little bit of defensive war. But the point is that the reductio ad absurdum against the libertarian property rights, namely that we should all leave because they own the whole kit and caboodle, is problematic based on this population business.
Mhm. Yeah, and of course that brings me to perhaps the closest analogy that we can think of when it comes to space exploration, which is well, world exploration between the 14 to 17-ish century when some of the best and brightest I guess from Spain and Portugal was sent out. The name that you may or may not remember is Christopher Columbus. But there were people such as I think Francisco Pizarro or Hernan Cortés who did far worse things than people wrote about what Christopher Columbus did. So, but you made a point in, I think, the book that it was not these explorers that are to blame, but the monarchs that sent them, say Queen Isabella and King Philip and all that. So, yeah, tell me more about this.
Well, the conquistadores were very nasty. They killed a lot of the Aztecs, and then there were the Norsemen who would raid other places from Norway, and they would raid England. The Romans raided the Middle East. I mean, there's a lot of raiding and unjustified killing. Hopefully, none of that will happen because there are no people right now on Mars and on the moon. So when we go there and colonize, we're not going to be kicking anyone out. Even Navis, they don't exist. They're not on Mars. There are no people on Mars that we can discern. And let's stipulate that there are no people. So the analogy falls. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with traveling. And Christopher Columbus traveled. He thought he was going to India. He ended up in New Jersey somewhere or Virginia, I forget where. Um, what happened afterward was difficult. And there is also the tradition of Thanksgiving, where the white people were on the verge of starvation, and the Indians helped keep them alive, gave them food. So, I mean, that would be a much nicer way to have interaction. But I think the key is that if the Indians said, well, we own all the land, and any European who comes here, we're going to kill. Well, they only had 3 million. How could they homestead in 160 acres or whatever? And then the other argument against it, well, that's white man's logic. The Indians had a different property right, from their view, where they could get up on a high sea, and wherever they could see, they say they own. Well, I would say too bad on that. We have to impose white man or John Lockean, who was a white man, principles on these people who think that they can own the whole kit and caboodle with 3 million people. I don't think that that's just. And I don't think it's just because I'm not a native person. By the way, I have two co-authors who are native people who we go over this stuff with, but they're libertarians, so we didn't have any problems on that.
Okay. Now, finally, I'm sure there will be like means of communications between people of different planets, and the best analogies that I can think of is the post and the telegram, and of course the telephone. And at the start, I think, again, these means were all owned by the state, but then were privatized like gradually. So, how would you make a plan to just to privatize the means of interplanetary communication from the get-go?
Well, I'm a professor. I'm not supposed to answer any questions. So let me go circuitous on you. When you say that originally the government did it, let me take the case of the subway system in New York City. There's the BMT, the IRT, and the IND. The BMT, the Borough of Manhattan Transport, and the IRT, Interborough Transport, those were private. Those were built privately. And what happened is they were going to raise their fare from a nickel to a dime, and the government went apoplectic and not nationalized, but municipalized them. And now IND was created by the government. And now this guy, Ma'am Danny, who might be the next mayor of New York City, is talking
Yeah.
about, taking over all the grocery stores or something like that. But the point is that in many of these cases, it was initially private. Now, getting back to your question of means of communication, Thomas Edison was private. He had a role in communication. Bill Gates was private. He had a role in communications. I mean, the Zoom that we're now on, or whatever, yeah, we're on Zoom. I don't know that Bill Gates created that, but the followers of Bill Gates. Now, what's his name? Oh, I can't think of his name. He was a presidential contender, and he said that the government created the internet.
Al
No,
Gore, maybe? Yeah.
that's
Is it
it,
Al
Al
Gore?
Gore. Thanks. Yeah, I'm getting old. I'm getting senile. I forgot his name. Al Gore said that the government created the internet, and I think not. I think that yes, the military used it a little bit, but private enterprise had a very important role in this. So let's not give the government more credit than it's due. I'm willing to give government some credit. Even thieves do good things. I mean, if you take a lot of money and you do something good, well, then you get something good. A lot of government takes credit for stuff that private people did, but every once in a while, a government bureaucrat does something good. We have to acknowledge that. But I would hope that the government didn't have any role in interplanetary communication. Now, let's take the case of Jimmy Kimmel. I'm sure you've heard of that. Jimmy
Yeah.
Kimmel was a comedian who didn't like Donald Trump too
Yeah.
much, and Donald Trump didn't like him. It was reciprocated. And Donald Trump said to the sponsors, look, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, you don't own that. It's just a license, and we can take your license away. Well, the problem here is that the band should have been privatized. I mean, Newspapers are privatized, magazines are privatized, telephone, the Pony Express was privatized. You shouldn't have had a system where the owners of NBC and ABC and Fox News and all those are just there by courtesy of the government, because now the government has a great role in communications. So I would say we should privatize the airwaves and let now the privatization process is interesting. How do you do it? Well, how did the Soviet Union privatize? Not as good a way as it could have been. Margaret Thatcher had a great way to privatize public housing. She said, sell it or sell it to every owner of the private housing for $10. And now they're the owners. Well, we could maybe do that with NBC and Fox and ABC and all the others. But the point is that to get back to your question, my hope is that communication between Mars, Moon, and Earth would have very little, if anything, governmental, and it should all be private.
Okay, well, I think there'll be more questions, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. Hopefully, this book will give people a lot to think about.
Wait. I have to wave
Okay.
the book around. It's a nice book.
Yep, there you go.
Buy the book.
Okay.
Thanks for allowing me the commercial, commercial.
All right. Thank you again for joining the show, Walter Block.
Always a pleasure. Thanks. I hope we do it again. I greatly enjoy your questions.